Hello, everyone. Welcome to On the Avenue Miami Art Week. My name is Oscar Riebling, Education Manager at the Wolfsonian, Florida International University. On behalf of the Wolf, the Miami Beach Urban Studios, and the Jewish Museum of Florida, we're thrilled to have you join us tonight for our first glance into upcoming exhibitions. Our program is an ongoing partnership amongst FIU's 3 cultural institutions on Washington Avenue. This virtual exploration, in a way, mirrors the experience of visiting our respective spaces, but from the convenience of your home or wherever else you might be tuning in from today. For tonight's program, we'll be ascending up through the avenue, beginning with Wolfsonian Chief Curator Silvia Barisione, offering a glimpse at 1930s art and design, followed by a conversation between artist Leandra Arvazzetti and MBUS Senior Special Events Manager Colette Mello, speaking of Arvazzetti's fiber-based works, and concluding with JMOF curator Jacqueline Goldstein, leading a virtual tour of a new exhibition on comic book pioneer Walt Eisner. Throughout the presentation, we encourage you all to submit your questions through the Q&A feature down below. And to those joining us through Facebook Live, we will also be monitoring the chat to bring questions to our panel. And with that, I'd like to introduce our first panelist, my colleague Silvia Barisione. Silvia, please, let's begin tonight's program.
Thank you, Oscar. I'm going to share my screen. Good evening, everybody. All right. As you know, the museum is not open yet. We hope to open soon, but in the meanwhile, we wanted to let you know what will be the exhibitions that you will be able to see soon. And I concentrated on 2 exhibitions that are going to open on the first floor, since we're going to open just the first floor. And they deal with the period of the Great Depression that we thought it was a decade which was very comparable, unfortunately, to our current crisis. So the idea was to create exhibitions that could be related to our contemporary situation. And the first one that I would like to present, is the one related to we called it the New Deal Art Relief, because it deals with the subject of the WPA, which is something very well known in the United States, not so much outside of the States, the so-called Works Progress Administration, which was a program which created in 1935 by President Roosevelt to relieve mass unemployment. So great infrastructures were built throughout the United States, and artists were commissioned with artworks to decorate many public buildings, many of these public buildings. In particular, there was a program which was devoted to unemployed artists, which was called the Federal Art Project. And it was a network of different art centers spread across the country, where artists taught classes, they painted murals, they designed posters, created prints, and also crafts and easel paintings. So through this exhibition, which is held in the auditorium, you won't recognize it, you can see some of the production of the period. Probably you've already seen at the Wolfsonian exhibitions about WPA murals. In this case, the material is a bit different. The curator, John Mogul, wanted to select some works that our audience doesn't know yet, is not so familiar. Like starting, for example, from this painting, which was, I can show you better, is a work by Carl Saxhild, who was hired by the WPA to work on the Alaska Art project. And you'll see that many of these WPA artists were interested also in the native cultures of their states. This is the case, for example, of this Alaska painting. You can see like the interest in the native cultures, not just in the painting, which is part of the Wolfsonian, but also in the mural project on the other side with the same subject, recurrent subject. Naturally, there was a promotion of tourism, of local tourism in the United States. So we have a big collection of posters promoting several states. I just selected some of the objects in the collection. Here are two posters by
Silvia, my apologies. It seems the presentation image isn't viewable to some of our guests. So would you mind just re-initiating the share? So just disabling screen share and again, beginning that. Thanks so much. I think it's back on. Perfect.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry. I apologize. You can see these two posters illustrating Pennsylvania, created by Catherine Milhouse, who was part of the Pennsylvania Art Project. And she illustrated the German pioneers, like the German legacy of Pennsylvania. She was raised in a Quaker family. We have a beautiful series of posters by Louis Sigrist that were presented in the Federal Indian Court Federal Building at the 1939 Golden Gate International Exhibition of San Francisco, representing the cultures of Native Americans. In particular, this is a beautiful stylization of a basket they were created by women and men of the Pomo Indian tribes of Northern California. So we're talking about the Federal Art Project, but actually there were more projects which were part of the same program called Federal One. One was the Federal Theater Project, represented in this poster for a marionette theater designed by Charles Verschuren. He became a very famous, important illustrator and poster designer, originally from the Netherlands. He moved to the United States. And there was the Federal Theater Project and the Federal Writers Project. This is a poster by Adrian Mackenzie, who worked for the New York City Art Project. And finally, the Federal Music Project. So I would like to credit for the section that deals with the library material about the Federal Music Project, the Federal Theater Project, and the Federal Writers Project. The undergraduate FIU students, I have to read their names: Giovanni Bombace, Kathleen Dowling, Claudia Mendoza, Benjamin Messier, and William Sam, that worked together with Frank Luca, our chief librarian, on the display. And still in the exhibition, there are examples of sculptures that were used in public buildings. This is from the Florida Art Project, the relief by John van Breben. We have several of them, and We know that she displayed many of these art panels depicting children in schools, public libraries, and public buildings all around Florida. Another subject of the exhibition will be prints, and in particular portraying industry and labor. This was by Chet Lamore, an artist originally from Wisconsin. And finally, among the mural projects, probably the most exciting and probably the new ones for our audience are the two mural studies by Hilaire Heiler for the San Francisco Aquatic Park Building, which is a WPA project from 1939. These were murals inside the building. You can see the building now hosts a maritime museum, and they were like representations of the aquatic world. And the building is an example of a streamlined architecture looking at the naval architecture. And so this is a small introduction to the first exhibition, which is the New Deal Art Relief. The second exhibition is Art for Justice. And again, it's still set in the 1930s because it deals with the most important civil rights case in the United States, at least in those years, the Scottsboro boys case. And it's illustrated. You'll see it's in the space. It used to be our classroom. It has been completely transformed by our chief designer, Richard Miltner. And the exhibition is focused mostly on a very precious manuscript that we have in the collection, Scottsboro, A Story in Linoleum Cuts. It's a manuscript that narrates through images the story of the Scottsboro boys. The two artists, Lynn Sheehan and Ralph Austin, we don't know anything about Lynn Sheehan, while Ralph Austin was a worker in the waterfront of San Francisco, but there is not much information about him. Anyway, he was part of a WPA. So the story, which is very well known, is the story of 9 African-American teenagers who were looking for work and were traveling from Alabama to Memphis on a train that stopped in Scottsboro, where they were arrested. So the narration of the book starts from like the kidnapping and the selling of Africans to the New World, like put like cattle in the ships and showing kids like working in the fields with no education. And all of these manuscript pages have notes on them. On the side page, written with a pencil, and you will be able to see them in the show on a screen. You'll be able to see all the plates, which are more than 100. I just selected some of them. So very like the style is inspired by German expressionism. It's very dramatic and with these plain surfaces, these very let's say flat pattern, and also a strong dynamism in the sign. You can see this image, very strong image of the two couches of this freight train with the kids, the black kids on one side and the white on the other side. There was a fight on the train, and two girls, when they were stopped in Scottsboro, and the African-American teenagers were arrested because two girls accused them of rape, which was not true, but the nine teenagers were condemned to the electric chair, and the case became a big case because the Communist Party decided to take a part to help them. It was naturally also a way to have black votes in a party which was mainly white. But anyway, the legal arm of the Communist Party tried to help them. And you can see this is a very strong images of the judge that demand death penalty, that remind us of George Groth's Prince, the German artist. And this very strong image of the 8 boys facing the electric chair, while the youngest one was 13, so he was just he was the only one that was spared. So the legal arm of the Communist Party, which was the legal what's the name? Anyway, they tried to help them, and the case became an international case all over. They traveled to Europe. One representative of the Communist Party with one of the mothers, Ada Wright, traveled to Europe, and you can see like this representation of with quoting the Communist Manifesto, like trying to save them, and in the end, this image of like the thanks to the Communist Party, the workers, a black and an Asian and a white worker, like marching towards the future, saying like the back cover says they shall not die. Naturally, I mean, the case went long for a long time, and in 1937, 4 of them were exonerated and then released, but the case went on for many years. So none of them was in the end condemned to the electric chair. But like there are like the images of the sculptor boys, of their mothers, became like the images for the Labor Defender, which was the magazine of this international labor defense, which was I don't remember the name, which was the legal arm of the Communist Party. So this is the show. You will see like it's focused mostly on the sculptor boys, but there will be other themes related, like examples of lynching. That's what the sculptor boy risked when they arrived in Scottsboro, if they were not put in jail. And so after the sculptor boy exhibition, which has been curated by our chief librarian, Frank Luca, I just wanted to introduce you briefly to a small installation that we have done on the ramp going to our store. It's an installation of depression glass, which comes from a donation from the late Arva Park, a great Miami historian. She donated to us more than 900 pieces, and we displayed them. They are the famous like production of the so-called depression glass, which was produced mostly from the end of the 20s to the 1940s, which became very popular because they were molded, like machine molded. They were cheap, very resistant, with a lot of colors. And they were also given as a gift to encourage people to buy a set at the theater or at the gas station or in cereal boxes. And now they have become a collectible object. Naturally, we decided to use 3 colors, red, blue, and white. But I just show you the red detail, so not to spoil your next visit. And naturally, we are not open yet, but if you want to see an object of the Wolfsonian, a great work representing American WPA, you can go to Design Miami, where we have a beautiful wood panel, which was commissioned by the WPA in Seattle, and it's now on display. So thank you so much for your attention. And now I'm going to introduce my colleague, FIU colleague, Colette Mello.
Hi, Sylvie. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. I love to see all of those exhibits. The one work you showed, the mural of Hilar, reminds me of what we have in our Washington gallery a little bit. So I'm excited about that. True. And then the work in For Justice, there's one image. Were those woodcuts?
Yes, they were linoleum cuts.
They're woodcut. There's the one image of the X, the young man standing up, and it reminds me of the contemporary artist. I think his name is Von Span. He had a work at Perez Art Museum recently.
Ah, interesting.
It's very stunning, very similar. So, and I collect depression glass. So all of those
that's good.
So nice. So thank you for that. I look forward to when you're opening and we can come visit you all.
Yes, please.
So let me share what's going on here. Hello everyone. My name is Colette Mello. I'm the curator and special events manager at Miami Beach Urban Studios. I'm pleased to be part of our 3rd edition of On the Avenue virtual happenings, presented by Jewish Museum of Florida, the Wolfsonian Museum, and Miami Beach Urban Studios, all Florida International University cultural institutions on Washington Avenue in the city of Miami Beach. FIU Miami Beach Urban Studios, known as MBUS, is an incubator for communication, architecture, and the arts, and a collider for people, design, and technology. We're located on Washington Avenue and Lincoln Road. We have 3 galleries, Innovation 3D Printing Lab, and classrooms in our space. I'd like to thank Miami Beach Department of Tourism and Office of Cultural Affairs for supporting MBUS as a cultural anchor institution and for their continued support of our cultural programming. As I mentioned, this is our 3rd edition of On the Avenue, but today we want to share what programming we have for Miami Art Week. This is my favorite time of year in Miami. Usually the weather is great, as it is today, and I love running around Miami and looking at art, and I love organizing the exhibitions here. So what we have going on here is we have 3 exhibitions that we're going to talk about today. Our featured artist is Leandra Arvazzetti. Her exhibition is titled Resurfacing Emerging from the Storm, which is located in our Washington Gallery. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Tomorrow we have a premiere of a new series of talks titled Teacher Talks with Michael Klotz. These conversations will be between our MBUS musician in resident, violist Michael Klotz, and he will be in conversation with other famed musicians. This week's edition will feature internationally acclaimed violinist Elmer Olivier. Thursday, we have the official virtual viewing of FIU art professor Jennifer Prince's new work, Exposed to Our Methods of Being. But because you're here today, we're gonna have a sneak peek of that as well. And then Friday, we have at 7:30, we have a virtual concert with our Misty Shore duo, which is streamed live on YouTube with pianist Chin Wee Jen and Jacob Dave Sudupal on electronics. So all our events are virtual and they will be streaming. So you can check our website for all the links for all of them. However, if you would like to make an appointment to see the exhibitions, you can email me directly at cmello@fiu.edu and we can make an appointment for you to come in. We are required that you wear a mask and we are social distancing. So now in our main gallery, we have the BFA thesis exhibition, Everything Must Go. These are 7 student artists that are graduating in May with this thesis work. We're going to show a video of the work to give you a taste of what the exhibition is about. And Raymond, my assistant, is going to show that in just a second. This exhibition was under the direction of Professor Jennifer Prince. She's also in our design gallery, but this is just a walkthrough of our main gallery, which is on the 4th floor of our building. These are all BFA students. And what's exciting, we have the BFA thesis exhibition twice a year. We have it in November because they're graduating, and then we have them again in the spring for when they graduate. This one, we never know if it's going to be all photography. It's interesting because every year it's either like all painting or it's all photography. And this year it's really a lot of conceptual art, which I was very excited to see because I love conceptual art. These are little ceramic pots that Leslie created. This is a video. She made the ceramic pots out of this water from her bath. And this is her prints. And she actually, I was really impressed with this young lady. She actually came into the gallery several times and was experimenting with different pastes and how they would work on the walls. And then this young lady is working with the idea of being a Black woman and what beauty is. And you can see she's taking off her nails, she's doing her hair. What it means to be a Black woman in our society. And then this is Franco. And these are actually, he took his father's work tools and created some of the scrapings on these fences that he put together. And he's very interested in immigration and what it means to be, to live in the United States as an immigrant. And then this young man, Daniel Quintana, is a video about a city who has goes through a very horrible time with some unfortunate incidents that happened to him. And then Tori Scott is about the loss of her grandmother, who actually passed away during the pandemic from coronavirus. And this is like a memorial of her. And she actually had started this work before her grandmother got sick. And then it turned, and that's a Bible that her grandmother would read all the time. And this is a work by Ari, and he was very interested in going through different magazines and catalogs and looking for interesting works and then putting a riff on it. And this is his work as in another part of the gallery that he has as well. There's a sound component to this, but we're not sharing the sound right now. And then this young lady was referencing her family and what it is to when there's divorce and separation and in the family. So our next exhibition that we wanted to show you was an exhibition by, it's actually a pop-up exhibition by Professor Jennifer Prince, and it's located in our design gallery. And the title of this work is Exposed to Our Methods of Being. If Raymond, if you could show us that clip. So Jennifer, usually she's an art professor and she's really interested in printmaking and drawing. And she also does photography, but during the pandemic, she actually started working with fiber art. It's my favorite work. And so this gallery is normally it's our design gallery, and so we usually have this for our architecture professors, which we teach architecture here at Miami Beach Urban Studios. But right now, due to the pandemic, we have not been having classes here, face-to-face classes, so everything's been virtual. So I was able to take over the space temporarily. So last but not least, we're going to view a video clip of Leandra Arvazzetti's installation, Resurfacing, Emerging from the Storm. But first, I'd like to read the curatorial statement for the work, and then we will watch the video, and then we get to speak with Leandra. So this is Resurfacing, Emerging from the Storm. Leandra Arvazzetti's intuitive maximalism approach to art making is evident in the site-specific work. The title, Resurfacing, Emerging from the Storm, hints at the struggles of loss and pain that have occurred during the pandemic, the ability to tread water, endure, and survive during turbulent times. The work alludes to the color field painters of the 1950s, in particular, Helen Frankenthaler. Ms. Arvazzetti's use of South Beach trademark colors of neon pinks, aquas, and greens depict living in what is now an empty tropical city. A city that is based on tourism now struggles through the tragedies of no tourists, no work, no cruise ships, vacant hotels, empty restaurants and clubs, without financial stability since the pandemic began in March 2020. In Resurfacing, Emerging from the Storm, Leandra uses fabric, string, fishing nets, yarn, paint, tarps, and inspiration from the last 8 months to create this abstract fiber sculpture. The diaphanous installation is suspended from the ceiling with translucent filament that form a complex support system for the organic aquatic shape. The lyrical wave sinuously flows through the space from west to east at varying heights that range from 4 to 7 feet from the ground. The swell gently forms and then breaks into a chaotic crescendo of colors, textures, and shapes. Leandra Arvazzetti was born and raised in Miami. She received her MFA in sculpture from Florida International University. Her love of fashion and fiber can be traced to her maternal grandmother, who worked in fashion and taught her how to sew. The artist references her Peruvian lineage as influencing her love of fibers, vibrant colors, and elaborate designs. Ms. Arvazzetti now lives in South Carolina and is an art professor at Piedmont Technical College. She's exhibited at the Bakehouse Art Complex, Miami International Airport, and Broward College, as well as here at Miami Beach Urban Studios. So Raymond, if you could take it away for us. So this Washington gallery is a really interesting space. It has very high ceilings, and the walls are marble, so you can't really nail anything into the wall. So you have to be very creative in how we install installations here. We've had several installations. It's one of the hardest galleries to work in, but it's one of my favorites because I like the challenge of seeing what we can do in the space. And I'm always so excited and thrilled when I see what artists like Leandra can do in a space like this. And I also like that it's right on Washington Avenue, and you don't even have to come into the gallery. You can just peep in through the windows and see the exhibition. I have to, while we're here on this video, I have to say thank you to Rena, my technical assistant, who always helps us put together these videos. And he's been really important in helping me organize the exhibitions for Art Week and other exhibitions that we've been working on. So I'd like to take this opportunity to also to invite Leandra to come on with us and to share some insight with us about how she came up with the idea and what her inspiration was and her process in making art.
Great. Thank you so much, Colette. I'm so happy to be here. Like you said, I recently moved to South Carolina, so it was nice to get a chance to come back home and back to FIU. So really great to be here. We started talking a little bit over the phone when you proposed the project about just how we've all been struggling over this past year collectively, right, as humans in this crazy environment. And I think that the inspiration for this piece really came from that, from just like an emotional explosion, just this release that needed to happen because of everything we've been experiencing. And generally speaking, in my work, I'm usually really inspired by the materials I use, by the space, because I often work in site-specific places. And all of that kind of communication coming together between the materials, the Washington Gallery, the varied emotions that we've all been experiencing, that's really where the idea for kind of this wave came from. This wave of emotions, this wave of a need for release, a need to take a breath, right? We've all felt like we're underwater, and we just needed to express that. And so it's partly a celebration in a way, even though there's still so much going on and that we need to get through. But I think we needed to take this time to really just, resurface, like the title says.
Well, I know when we were speaking, and it was before the election.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were a little bit nervous, but optimistic. I was
Right.
very optimistic that Florida was going to turn blue, but it didn't. But we were still, and so we were nervous. And then after the election, we were like, oh, okay, we can take a deep breath now. And then, everything, it didn't fall quite into place like we thought, because we still see that the election is still, we think we have the president elected, but we know that it hasn't been so easily transitioned to as we thought it would be normally. So,
Absolutely.
so your process, I know I wasn't there a lot. We were social distancing. You were wearing a mask. You were pretty much alone down there. You were on a huge ladder. Were you listening to music, or, talk about the materials, your process with the materials?
Yeah, there's a little bit of both. A big part of my process is this idea that there is this communication between the space, between the materials, between all of us on some kind of subconscious level. So my process is really intuitive. I like to spend time in the space before I actually start working. So it was really just about kind of going into the gallery, laying the materials out, and just what I like to call play, just playing with the materials, see what kind of intuitively happens. And then that's where the idea for this fluid form kind of suspended from the ceiling came from. And I started working kind of on the ground, mixing the different materials together, pinning things, and then suspending the form from the ceiling. So music sometimes, my favorite music is like, grunge music from the 90s. So you can kind of see that in my aesthetic. Sometimes there's no music, but it's all being in this kind of meditative state with this subconscious kind of flow between the materials, between myself and the environment.
Right. Are there any artists that inspire you? Or I know I mentioned Helen Frankenthaler because I see your work and I see these huge color fields. Is she someone that inspires you, or do you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely see that with the abstract expressionists. Jackson Pollock, definitely a big influence.
I see the
Krasner,
Mhm.
yeah, for sure. Also that idea of automatism, right? That you're just kind of in autopilot and you're letting this, this flow state. So that's definitely a big influence. Contemporary wise, I love Katharina Gross. I love Carla Black, Nick Cave, all of these artists for their materiality, for their use of color. So yeah, definitely a lot of contemporary artists I could go on and on.
So, well, thank you, Leandra. I think we went over our time. I apologize to my colleagues, but I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Luna Goldberg, at the education manager at the Jewish Museum of Florida right now. But I want to thank you for a wonderful, evocative installation. It was really fun to work with you during these difficult times, but it did bring joy to me. And I hope anyone that comes by MBUS and walks by our window, it brings joy to them as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Colette.
Thank you. So I'm going to pass it on to my colleagues at the Jewish Museum of Florida. Thank you.
Thank you, Colette. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. We are moving down the street today, and we're going to take a look today at our most recent exhibition of Will Eisner. Will Eisner, comic illustrator and innovator. And before I hand it over to my colleague, our curator, Jacqueline Goldstein, I would like to let you know about 2 events we'll be hosting this week. One of them is also in partnership with the Wolfsonian as well as the Frost Art Museum. It's our FIU Museum Family Day, where we'll be making crafts. And on Sunday, we'll also be hosting our annual klezmer concert. Information in the chat, and I will pass it on to my colleague, Jacqueline.
Thank you, Luna. I'm going to do a shared screen. Will Eisner, born in New York in 1917, was the creator of the Spirit comic book series that you see a few pages here, which began in 1940 and lasted until 1952. And the Spirit was the story of Denny Colt, and he was in the police force, and then perished, woke up in the cemetery, and suddenly was the Spirit, who was a vigilante. And he worked with the detective of the chief of police, who was an old friend of his. And what interesting thing that Eisner said when he was creating the Spirit was that at the time Superman was coming out and all these other costumed heroes, and Eisner did not want that. He wanted his character to basically be a regular guy. And his one concession was, after he was told it needs to be some, kind of a costume, his one concession was to put on a domino mask, which is really just a mask, that's covering the eyes with eye holes, obviously, and, gloves and a fedora with his suit. And with that, he was able to create this vigilante character. And this right here that you see, unfortunately, I can't get you much closer, but this actually, the reason why I put this on exhibit, it was Eisner, one of his favorite stories that he ever did for the Spirit. And it's the story of Gerhard Schnabel. And Eisner really related to it because it was basically a down and out guy from, a lower income neighborhood. And he goes and tries to, make something of himself. And unfortunately, it doesn't end well for Gerhard Schnabel. But Gerhard Schnabel was able to fly. And early in his life, everybody told him, don't do it. People think you're, weird or whatever, somebody different. So he hides it, and then he gets fired from his job and goes up to the roof, and he sees the building being taken over by thieves. And so he decides he's going to try to jump and help thieves. And what happens is he ends up missing the building and goes down all the way to the street. Nobody ever knew he could fly. And it was a sad story, and that's the end of the story. But it was very emotional for Eisner. And Eisner grew up in my hometown of New York City. He grew up, many of his stories have been affected by his growing up. He grew up in in tenements in New York City, the son of lower income parents. And this really had effect on his career and how he drew, illustrated, and wrote his stories. Let me take you through some other, as we see here. This is a closer look up at Gerhard Schnabel. This is called on-timesmanship. I'd like to get you closer. If you have a chance to come back into the exhibit, these white circles on the floor will take you where you need to go, and you can motor yourself around. And over here, you can press these whites to see my data points, which will give you much more in depth than what I'm racing through right now. So on-timesmanship is basically, it's from a chapter of one of his graphic novels. And by the way, he was the creator of the graphic novel. The first one in 1978 was called A Contract with God. So he had called graphic novels sequential art, and it was the first of its kind, basically a comic book, but in a novel, style, obviously much longer than a regular comic book. So on-timesmanship fits right in with his growing up in the city. These are different scenes of commuting. As you can see here, people trying to get into an elevator, go around. Here's commuting through the train station, all the trials and tribulations that happen with commuting in the city. If you see here, there's another person, worker in the office, and of course, your New York City ever-present traffic. This group of images here, I put them on exhibit because they are significant in being a part of one of Eisner's larger groups of series of smaller, vignettes basically put into a larger book. And this one is about city people. And let me keep us going through. I put in some large blow-ups. Color images in his comics. As you can see here, this is from The River of Crime. Here's our character of the spirit. And he is under these lights that Eisner liked to draw, really showed the drama, the heightened drama of the picture, the spirit walking alone by himself in the cover of night. And here you can see crime as in floating through the grate right there. And it's basically, one of the most intense images from the spirit, because it really shows you how the vigilante, our spirit, basically is working by himself. He's got the whole basically world on his shoulders, walking, quietly in the street with so much, heaviness on him and drama, and that we get through the black background and the yellow light shining right on the figure. Let me pull this over here. This is Dropsy Avenue. I put this in. It's 4 pages. And by the way, all the images in the exhibition are originals. And so this is pencil and pen and ink. And what we're looking at right now, unfortunately, I can't get us closer, but these 2 images are from a series that he created called Dropsy Avenue. And Dropsy Avenue comes a page right out of his childhood. It's basically a neighborhood and a street, Dropsy Avenue in New York, where people from all different ethnicities lived on the same street, whether it was African-American communities with the Irish, with the Italians, with the Jews, and all different ages. And that is what the series Dropsy Avenue looks at, is the interaction between the different ages and different ethnicities that make up just on this one street, Dropsy Avenue. During World War II, Eisner joined the US Army. And during that time, Spirit was put on hold, and the Army put his illustration abilities to good use. So what he was doing was, number one, he created a lovable character called Joe Dope, who was in the military. And, you know, it was really a way to make the soldiers laugh and enjoy themselves as they were reading things. You know, here was a manual. Eisner was also tasked to create, and these were coming out in Army newsletters, Joe Dope, the character, basically like comics in an Army newsletters for the soldiers. He also created, he was tasked to create manuals for the soldiers for operating different machineries, but the task was for Eisner, how can I create a manual that these soldiers can relate to? And the way he did it was, as you see right here, creating it with illustrations and funny illustrations. And here is the actual information, but it's in a fashion that's, you know, enjoyable to read. And he continued for 20 years doing this for the Army, as he left the Army at the close of the war. But again, he continued working and creating these manuals for the Army for 20 years. This is part of a series called The Name of the Game. And he created this comic based on his wife Anne's life and her multi-generational family. And what is very interesting to note about Eisner is everything he created always had a, you know, some sort of, you know, something very important for him, that he put a piece of himself in each of his characters and series, which is very important to understand about Eisner. So in The Name of the Game, this is done after his wife Anne's family, multi-generational family from the States, very wealthy. Her father was a stockbroker, so you can see him here with his, you know, fancy suit, very successful stockbroker. And he wanted his daughter to marry somebody successful. And in the story, the daughter is dating a poet, which is, you know, it's basically a what if story. So the poet takes place of Eisner as being the artist. And what happens is the father convinces Eisner, or I should say the poet, to join his firm, and he becomes very successful. And then he ends up being a real jerk to his wife. And it's a what if story. And the reality of the situation is that Eisner became a very successful illustrator and, you know, comic book illustrator and writer, which is, it's really, that's part of the charm of this whole series, what he called the what if. This is a small slice of sunset in Sunshine City. And basically it's a nod to Eisner when he semi-retired from New York to Florida in the 1980s. And this is all, you know, vignettes of his life in the condos and other retirees. And he did a little series about that. Sunset in Sunshine City. I put several comics and books on display in this exhibition. Unfortunately, I can't get you close to show them to you, but one of the pieces I did put was the first graphic novel that he did called A Contract with God, right here. And that was also semi-autobiographical about his upbringing. Again, there we go back to putting himself in everything he did. And here we have, again, if you get a chance to come back, you can click on my data points to bring yourself closer. Here we have The Name of the Game. And again, this is semi-autobiographical. It is about a family growing up in New York City, also low income, and all the trials and tribulations that happens with the family in the surrounding neighborhood. And as you can see here, just different types of family drama. And this is an illustration of Eisner reading with kids in the library. This is Mortal Kombat, which is funny. It's not a video game, Mortal Kombat, but again, it's another series that I put in the exhibit. If I can get us a little bit closer. This particular one is sad. It's the story of, and again, his stories were about real people and real things they had to deal with. This is a story about a woman who had been taking care of her father for over 20 years, most of her life. And she's over 40 when he passes away. And she's angry. And what is she going to do? She's alone. She's single. She has no life at this point. She's only been taking care of her father. She doesn't know how to do anything. And that her story, you know, comes along here. And it's a powerful one. Let me bring you back. I do want to show you one other piece, if I can get us here. This was his series, Fagin the Jew, which takes place just like Oliver Twist in a low-income area. But in this case, Fagin happens to be, he created Fagin as in, it's the story of Oliver Twist, but from Fagin's point of view. And Fagin was an Ashkenazi Jew. And in this episode, you know, it's everything from Fagin's point of view, how Fagin is a poor guy trying to make him something of his life. He was also a fighter. And, you know, it was an interesting riff on the Oliver Twist story. Eisner was so beloved with his visionary concepts of the spirit and tales of, you know, human life and becoming the father of the graphic novel, which was hugely impacted comics. He also was adamant in the comic book art and illustrative art. And he became so well known and so well respected that the annual Eisner Awards were named after him, which are basically the Oscars for comic books. And that pretty much concludes the tour today. It's my pleasure to be here. And again, I would recommend you coming back to our website and clicking on these white circles, going at your leisure, being able to read the comics when you can, get closer to them, and hit on my data points. And with that, I'm going to close this evening, and thank you very much for joining us.